So Jason, why laundromats?
It's a little bit of a long story. My wife and I have 5 kids. We always spoke about the fact that when we eventually had kids, we'd like to have the opportunity to go and live in another country and take travelling, I guess, to the next level and then immerse our family in a different culture for a period of time. We looked around the world, ultimately decided to come to New York. And so my wife and I spoke about it and we said, let's start a business in New York City. So. I hadn't even stepped into a laundromat until late 2022, ever in my life.
Right. You went cold turkey. You got your first laundromat. Here we're in Staten Island today. Yep. Not too long after, you acquired a second laundromat.
We bought this location. It was late February of 2023 and then the 2nd of November of 2023. So about 6 months between the two. And yeah, looking around for number 3. So if you know of any leads, send them my way. I guess the industry, for reasons that I don't fully understand coming from Australia, it's just like super fragmented. There's very few sort of dominant players. Right. You ask the questions like why laundry and why'd you come in? What I see is that there's a whole bunch of people coming in that haven't been lifelong laundromat owners. There's a new way of thinking about, okay, how do I bring a bit of tech, or what are some of the shortcuts that I can use to, accelerate my business? And it's really exciting.
It's like we're in the early days of the Wild West.
Yeah,
like
it feels like it's the start of the gold rush.
Like the gold rush. That's a great example. The question is, are we going to be digging for gold, or are we going to be selling picks and shovels? So Jason, why laundromats?
It's a little bit of a long story, so you'll pick up from the accent that I'm obviously not local.
Well, we are in Staten Island, so I just thought you were a native of Staten Island.
So my wife and I have 5 kids, and before we had kids, we'd always, my wife and I travelled a bit, and we quite value travel. It allows you to broaden your perspectives on the world and understand that the world is bigger than the place where you currently live. So we always spoke about the fact that when we eventually had kids, we'd like to have the opportunity to go and live in another country and take travelling, I guess, to the next level and then immerse our family in living in a different culture for a period of time. And my oldest son is 17, my youngest daughter is 7. And we got to the point where a few years ago where we said, if we don't do this soon, then our older son's going to miss the opportunity. So we looked around the world for somewhere to move to, and we ultimately decided to come to New York. And then once we'd made that decision, we then needed to work out, well, what are we going to do when we get there?
Right.
And I looked at had a couple of options. One was to go and do some further study with a company that I was working at the time. I'd owned my own businesses back in Australia in the past. Small businesses I quite enjoy. Building a business and running my own operation. And so my wife and I spoke about it and we said, let's start a business in New York City. So we ultimately settled on laundromats. Okay. So the business I'd run in the past had been, I don't know what the term that I think it's used now is like sweaty. So like you're using a bit of your own...
the sweat equity.
Yeah. So like I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. I'd run a free-range chicken farm in the past. We had a school bus company where we had 10 buses on the road. I did a lot of my own repairs up until a point in time before we hired our own mechanic.
Right.
I remember being under a chicken shed at one point, up to here in stuff I'd rather not talk about. So looked around for industries where I could put in some of my own effort early on. But also the plan is to grow it beyond, me being involved in the day-to-day fixing of machines. So the longer-term plan was to grow like a business that allowed us to put in a layer of management and then, step back, I guess, from the day-to-day and then, manage the business. And we looked at laundromats, and for a variety of reasons, that was, that sort of stacked up to an opportunity that we thought was going to work for us.
Yeah, I don't think you running laundromats is going to be nearly exciting as a chicken farm. I don't think your stories running the laundromat are going to compare with those.
Well, there's plenty of stories that come out of laundromats. They're a little bit different to chicken farms, but there's some days you scratch your head and think, man, how did that happen? But
that's got to be the most dynamic story I've heard. From one country to another, thinking about what to do. And it's a challenge because it's not like it's just you and the wife. You're like, oh, it's just 2 adults. You're bringing the whole family, so 5 children, and everyone's coming over, and it's a total adjustment for everybody. And then starting a new business, it's not like you transferred with a position with a company or a job you already had. So my hat's off to you.
There's like a pile of paper on my desk for the visa paperwork. It was took us about 2 years to get through the whole process and get here. So yeah, a bit of work, but we think it's paying off.
It's paying off. That's awesome. I remember when we first met at the Luke and Lee Williford's event in North Carolina, and your dad and mom were there, and you were telling me about making the transition. And I was just like, wow, this guy must really love laundromats. He's coming to a whole nother country for it.
Well, believe it or not, I hadn't even stepped into a laundromat until late 2022 ever in my life.
Right. So you went cold turkey.
Yeah, I have no background in the industry.
So you went cold turkey. You got your first laundromat. Here we're in Staten Island today. And not too long after, I saw you post online that you acquired a second laundromat.
Yeah.
So what was the time frame between acquiring your first one and then the second one?
Yeah, so we bought this location. We've just gone 12 months. It was late February of 2023.
Right.
And then the 2nd of November of 2023. So about 6 months, whatever that is, maybe 7 months between the two. And yeah, looking around for number 3. So if you know of any leads, send them my way.
No, I'm going to buy another one before you do. Then I'll tell you. There's a lot out there now. And I think it's, you and I talked about it when we were out previously. I think it's a good opportunity now. Obviously, our industry is really hot because of the internet, and everybody's posting about it's a 95% success rate. We can get into that later. And it's like the best boring business, and it's so passive.
So I think that's the bit, if I can just interrupt, the passive piece I think is, so first of all, yes, the industry's hot, and it's really hard, I think, to buy a laundromat, particularly in New York City at the moment.
Yep.
I see things posted online that are, you do the quick calculation between the posted income and the revenue, and it's like, wow, this thing's doing a 60% margin, right? So, without even having to ask for anything, that there's some things that you got to work out before you go any further. Laundromats are not making a 60% margin. Certainly none of the ones I own. But the passive piece, I think that's I think it's kind of doing us a bit of a disservice. Like I think they can be like low effort compared to some other businesses or jobs, depending on how you set your business up. But particularly here in New York City, like there's a big capital expense to get into the industry.
Totally.
And I think if you're expecting to invest the amount of capital you'd need to invest to get into a laundromat anywhere and then step away from it and not really run it as a business, I think that's kind of, you're not going to be successful in my opinion. Sure, there's going to be some outliers where people will say, look, I've done this and I've had this outcome, but I think generally speaking, if the average person was wanting to get into the industry, they shouldn't think about it as being passive. They should think about it as, okay, well, I've really got to work in this thing, every day. Now, whether that's working in your business, folding laundry or serving customers, or working, I guess on your business is the other way to look at it. And that there is a lot of effort that needs to go into acquiring customers and understanding where your revenue is coming from and growing different segments of your business. And that part of it, people shouldn't think of that as being passive. It's not, right? So,
right.
I work, I probably work 7 days a week if I'm honest. But part of that is because I really enjoy it.
Right. And out of those 7 days, how many hours per day would you say you're allocating to the laundromats?
So the two businesses are very different. So the first business we bought where we are here, it does 70% of its revenue through self-serve.
Okay.
And 30% through pickup and delivery. Interestingly enough, both parts of the business have grown, and those splits have stayed basically the same over the last 12 months, which, I think is just coincidence.
Right.
And so in this location, it's got we've got 7 staff here that work, a variety of different shifts.
Because you're 24 hours here.
We're open 24 hours. So one of the first things we did was change to 24 hours in this location. Used to close at 10 p.m. I could see in the numbers that anywhere from about 8:30 onwards, we were not really making any revenue for the self-serve customers. So we had like that whole last wash piece, and so anyone that was thinking about coming in around that time was like, well, do I roll the dice and get there and tell me I can't use the washer? So, from 8:30 onwards, we were open till 10. we really weren't making any sort of significant revenue. And so we had the labour piece for that extra 2 hours. On top of that, when we bought the store, there was a roster for cleaning that the existing staff would filter through. And so there was about 4 hours allocated each day for cleaning. And so that overlaid in the last shift of the day.
Got it.
So we had 2 staff on from about 6 p.m. onwards. And so I looked at it and thought, well, what if we just cleaned overnight but kept the store open? So we closed at 10. If I had 4 hours on, we're up until 2 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
We used to open at 6. I only had to fund another 4 hours. $15 plus, your taxes and things like that. You're talking.
So they clean 4 hours, then you do some drop-off.
Which I was paying for anyway.
Right.
And so, the out of pocket, if I didn't make any revenue at all, I'd be out of pocket $80 a day.
Right.
Right. And so we made the shift. That was sort of my thinking at the time. Made the shift open 24 hours, and I thought, well, if it doesn't work, I can always go back.
Go backwards.
But within the first month, we started to see the revenue from 8 to 10, and then from 10 to 12, and then we have people come in at 2 a.m. and
Jesus.
and do the shift workers and things like that.
People work the overnight shift.
Coming home from work that are working the overnight shift. We have like a $150. We had a $300 drop-off order at 4 a.m. one morning, and obviously you would have missed that opportunity if you weren't 24 hours. So. That was one of the first changes we made in the store, and it hands down helped. And then the other benefit we had is we have. So what we did was we split up the cleaning throughout the day. So we break down our cleaning roster into different segments, and each shift has a portion of tasks that they do in their shift. So we're cleaning the store 3 times a day. In different parts. And then the other benefit we had was that we then had the extra time overnight where we can be processing wash and fold orders.
Exactly.
So our volume of drop off and pick up and delivery has, I don't know the exact number off my top of my head, but I think it's like 48% increase in volume from when we bought it to today. So that combined with increasing our prices and things like that, it's really paid off as a business decision. So, we're pretty happy with it.
Yeah. So, slightly off topic, but
you asked the question you asked was like, how much time do I put into it? Yeah. So what I was going to say is in this store we have like some pretty slick operations, and the staff here really know what they're doing, and I really don't need to get involved in the day-to-day operations here. So my main task in this store is to come and take the cash out of the kiosks that we have, and collect the cash that comes from wash and fold orders, which are 2 different systems. And then I restock the vending machine. I don't know why. It's just a job I like to do.
You like putting the snacks in. So the question is how many snacks never make it in the machine, Jason?
couple for the trip home. But so in this store, like a low amount of effort for me in the store. The other store, we're probably understaffed in that store. So the first part of the journey there has been transitioning the staff over to the new operating system, where we use Sensors, our software. So transition the staff across to that, and then overlay my standard operating procedures onto the staff. So train them on that. And now I think what the next step there is we probably need to have some extra staff members in that store. So right now, I actually fill the gap on some of the pick up and delivery tasks down there. So we have to take our dry cleaning to our dry cleaner in that location.
Got it. In
this one they pick up. So some of those tasks I'm doing in that store still, while we work out like what the best way for us to do that is. So I'm more heavily involved in that store in the day to day, and then on top of all of that, we've got a real growth focus at the moment. So when I'm not in the stores, what I'm focused on is like how do we grow our customer base, how do we grow our revenue, how do we grow different segments of our revenue. And so a lot of my time outside of when I'm in the store is focused on, okay, what can we do to grow. So that's if you were to boil that down to how many hours, like, I don't know, probably more than a standard job, but I quite enjoy it. So
that's good.
Yeah.
So when I was going to say earlier off topic, it was not you, but what I was thinking, and the answer you gave me. And from when we first met in North Carolina, and then I listen to you now, and you're talking about the operations of the store and the system. I'm smiling externally, and then inside I'm like, my head is about to explode, because what I want our listeners and viewers to understand is what I've seen from you and heard, that you're very systems and numbers driven. Like, you sat here and you 70% of our revenue comes from here, 30% of our revenue comes from here. You did the math for the overnight shift, and you figured, hey, like, it's 80 more bucks. Like, what's 80 bucks for us to go into this and try it to see how is that going to benefit our clients and the business? And from your experience, not just, well, let me back up. Where does that come from? Because that's not like average that people.
Yeah, so the operations piece, so when I left home, I joined the Australian Army. I became an officer in the Australian Army. Went through a whole regime of training there. And then as I left that career, I moved into project management and then management of a manufacturing facility in Australia. So we used to make armoured vehicles for the Australian government. Okay. Worked for a company called Telus. I ended up running one of their large projects for an armoured vehicle, and then later managed their largest manufacturing site in Australia. So I had 400 staff report to me at one point in time. We used to have two main products. Something like 25,000 parts went into those two products, two production lines, 3,000 to 5,000 processes on those production lines, depending on what we were building. So no one can run an organisation like that unless you're very disciplined with systems and processes. And the whole site ran on process. Right. And so we had a very, obviously, like, you've got whole layers of management that go deep into the organisation for something of that size, but the principles can be taken from that and applied to any business, right? Exactly. And so, how do you, I'm constantly trying to think about ways, okay, how do we put a system around this that allows me not to be involved in it? Right. And it can be a whole variety of things. So software is one of the common pieces that people will use. But if you go out into our storeroom, we have just some really simple stickers that we've put onto the shelves in our little warehouse out the back that says, here's where the bounce dry sheets sit. Here's where the rubber bands sit. And so I've got this visual cue when I walk into the area at the back there. Okay, and the staff, so we keep two of every item on the shelf. Staff can draw from it as they need, and then we have a locked warehouse. So if I walk in or the staff walk in and there's one or less, okay, well, you better send Jason a message, or I need to replenish it. And so then we don't run out of, whatever the item is, plastic bags for our processing, or, detergent, or whatever it is. So that's another form of a system that you can put in place that allows, the business to run better. We didn't have that in place when we first took over, and there's been times here where I've driven, from one store to the other with a jug of detergent because, we ran out of something, or, a bag of rubber bands that, probably $1, but you can't send the staff out because we only have one staff on it at a time. So 35-minute car ride to bring down $5 worth of something. So so that where did it come from? It came from, I guess, the background I've got, but I do think anyone can. It's not because I've got some special background. Anyone can and should, I think, think about their business like that. Like, how do I put in place a system that allows you to get a process that can be run, repeated. And the other part in that is if you do go down that path, what you need to do is have a place where you can document that. So we use a tool called Notion. We're starting to build that out both with text and video for some of our standard operating procedures. Awesome. And then once you put those procedures in place, you need to have a feedback loop that allows you to test the procedure as you think it is, and then get the feedback from your staff to say, oh, we don't actually do it this way. This happens the other way around.
How we think it is.
Yeah, it's not how I as a business owner thought it happened, and how we documented it might not be how it's actually done. And so you want to have this ability to constantly iterate on that and continue to improve.
Great. So let's rewind. You first got this store. So let's go back, because there's a debate, not a debate, but there's a heavy conversation in our industry about leasing versus owning. What's your status here with the Staten Island store?
Yeah, so here we own the building.
So you own the property the store is in, and then you got the storage area we looked at earlier, which I think is phenomenal. Yeah. And then you've got space you got tenants in the spaces next door, or is that a separate building
it's
next
a
door?
separate building next door
Okay.
that we don't own that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And then in Brooklyn, lease or own?
Lease.
So you're doing a mix of the
Doing
two.
both, yeah.
So you get to experience both worlds. And New York is a very dynamic city, and it's a little different than like the mid states or on the going further where they have more, they go more horizontal where we go vertical. So when you first got into it and you stepped in Laundromat first time, we were talking about systems and procedures. What was the, to someone who's getting into the business for the first time, or maybe they've been in the business and they just been winging it and, pen and paper, everything. What was one of the first things that you looked at to say, I need to create a system for it that had a dramatic impact on the business in a positive way?
Yeah, so the first one was software. So we had existing point of sale that was a bit outdated and so the point of sale wasn't connected to the cloud in any way. There was no remote access.
Yep, totally standalone. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So any reports that you wanted to generate, any understanding of, okay, what was our revenue that day, or how much dry cleaning did we intake? You had to come to the store, download a report, and so that didn't work for me.
Not even download it. You hit the button and print it out on receipt.
Print it out on a piece of paper, yeah. And then you had to go and take the piece of paper and transcribe it into something you could use.
We had the same system in our store. I remember.
So that was the first one. So we brought in software sense, as I mentioned earlier. And then we had to train the staff on that. There was a lot of reluctance, I guess, to change because they were obviously used to the old system. But pretty quickly they were like, wow, this thing does a lot of things that the old one didn't used to do, and it's really easy to use. And it's kind
of the screen, the user interface is a lot. It's a lot less buttons and simpler on the screen.
Yeah. So that was I guess the first system and process that we introduced, and that allowed me, so your question was like, how did it change the business? Mm-hmm. So I think in the past, the system that was here, it really just like processed payments and allowed you to mark a location for where the laundry was stored.
Right.
So we have a storage rack in where we do the intake. Because you had to physically come to the store to run reports, which were on pieces of receipt paper, I tried to make something of that. It took me like the first week and a half to realize that wasn't a long-term solution.
Right.
So how did it change the business? So because of the modern nature of the Sense software, it's quite data rich. It allows you to run a variety of reports which you can then go and analyze to make decisions around your business. So we spoke earlier about what was happening with our revenue. Mm-hmm. So I could look at that on the wash and fold side of it, but we have CCI Laundry Card here in store, which also runs a series of reports remotely. And so we're able to look at those remotely and see, okay, well, really beyond 8 o'clock, we're not really making any revenue, but we're open to 10. And so because you could go and analyse the data, you can understand what's happening in your store, both at the micro level, like on that given day, but at the macro level, you can look at trends over a period of time and say, okay, week on week or month on month, here's what's happening, and give you a bit of an idea of what's the trajectory of our business, and what are some of the things we can do.
You can truly track it over time.
Yeah.
Where if you would have had, and I'm not knocking whether card or coins, I've lived in both worlds throughout business with the family and running laundromats. But if you didn't have laundry card, as you mentioned, you have here, you wouldn't have been able to look at that data in that specific way to understand what the store is doing at these different time periods to make those educated decisions off that data. So it's super important. So here you have laundry card, no coins here.
No coins.
And then what about in Brooklyn?
So in Brooklyn, when we bought the store there, it was coin only.
Okay.
And a month or two after I think it was about 2 months after we purchased it, we installed Sense Connect.
Okay.
So Sense Connect is the self-serve add-on, I guess, to the Sense software. And so in that store currently, the customer can pay with card at the machine. We've got QR codes which were to be fitted soon, so it would allow them to scan with their phone and pay with Apple Pay. And they can still pay with coin in that store. We've seen the uptake of card. I think it's around 50% of revenue comes through card.
Right.
And so our coin usage has dropped, by 50%. From what I understand, Q2, Sense is going to bring out a kiosk, which would allow the customer which would then allow us to take coin out of that store completely. So I think in the US, there's still a lot of use of cash. It's very different to Australia. So Australia's almost no cash in many segments of industry there.
Wow.
And so here, I think you do need it. You do need a way to take cash from customers.
Right.
So obviously pockets of the society that are cash heavy for a variety of reasons. And so I think the plan in that store is to get to a point where we can take cash at a kiosk and then allow them to, from the kiosk, start the washer or dryer that they want to start. So
yeah, we did that at one point. We went from, we had quarters, and life gets really interesting when you drop a 5-gallon bucket of quarters on the floor in the store when you're doing a collection. And, I just stared at it in the middle and it wasn't like at night when the store was closed. It's like the store is busy and I had to dump to fill the coin machine because it had ran low. And I just stood there and looked at all these quarters on the floor. And I was like, I'm tired of these quarters. But the thing that really got me was reporting and tracking. Yeah. Like I would literally, our 20-pound machines, I would dump all those individually and count those quarters to understand how much revenue did we did in the 20-pound. But
yeah, I try to do that.
Yeah, it was so painful, man. I like, oh my God. But then for some reason I was like, I think we were running low on quarters, and then most people don't know, like when you go to the bank, they don't give you quarters. You have to you pay for quarters. And I sell it to some people and they're still astonished by it. I was like, yeah, I can't take $500 to the bank and be like, give me 500 quarters. They charge a fee for that. And they're like, really?
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, and my dad would have me coming out with like, they come in $500 boxes, and they're rolled. So I'm carrying these heavy boxes to the car coming out the bank, and people are like, dude, like they must be rich. I'm like, no, it's just quarters. But some reason I made the decision, I can't remember what it was. I wanted to get away from quarters and I went to tokens because I was like, what's the easiest way I can do it that would be a low cost? So we went to tokens and I had to play with the coin drops a little bit, but it worked. And after that, I was like, this sucks. I need to go electronic. And we got a kiosk system where they could either scan the QR code on the machine, start it through their phone, or they went to a kiosk and put the quarters in it or put bills in it to start it. And when we first converted over, like we had some of our clientele just totally flip out. And they were like, everybody doesn't use a smartphone. Everybody doesn't want to pay electronically. And then when I walked the lady over to the kiosk and was like, look, put your quarters in and you just touch the screen and the machine will start. And she was like, oh, like her whole demeanor changed. So there is a point where we do want to, we want to make it convenient for ourselves as the business operator, the business owner, but we still have to consider the clientele in it. Because we're here to serve them. Yeah. Without them, there's no us.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, like we do 70% cash in the store. So customers have the ability at the kiosk to pay with card.
Right.
Introduced that about 8 months ago, and it grew to 30% pretty quickly. I was like, oh, great, this is going to keep going and we're going to get, most of the cash out of the, it just bottomed out. It's, sits around 35%. And
cash is not like,
it's just everywhere.
Yeah, I was going to say the debate between coins and cards, like, I'm like, I don't care to a certain point. I'm just like, the cash coming in the store, I look at that to say, how do we manage that? Because that's the part you can, once you build your systems and layers and you have reporting right, you can introduce, there's a staff member who handles that because you can document everything. You can look at laundry card and say X dollars came in, and if they take it out and do the deposit for you, you can go check the deposit and be like, they match or they don't match. Like, all right, John, we need to have a talk. Like, where's the $100? Great. So,
but it's a lot of work, managing cash. I see these debates online around credit card fees and things like that. There's no way, like we pay, fees are pretty standard across the board. There's the cost of managing the cash.
It's huge.
Collecting, counting, depositing, when you run out of certain bills, you got to go to the bank and get, some of that out. That cost, it's definitely not zero. And in my opinion, it's more than what the credit card fees are, particularly if you've got like a fair bit of volume in your store. It's
totally. And it is not talked about. When you mentioned online, when those conversations are happening, good, bad, and indifferent, the cost of cash it's always cash is king. Like there's a cost to it, and it's either you're paying someone to handle it for you, or it's your time because you got to go handle that cash. And then let's talk about safety. Like that is not a piece that like talked about. And in a previous episode with another owner, Hinder, You know, we were talking about it, and I was laughing where my dad would like ingrain in us when we were younger, like, you never dump the machines at the same time. Don't empty out the coin machine at the same time. Don't take the cash out the store at the same time. Don't go the same route to the bank. It was like all these different things. And I'd be like, Dad, like, whatever, it's not that serious. But then as I got older, I'm like, depending on how much volume your store is doing, every week, you're pulling a good chunk of change out there.
Thousands and thousands of dollars.
Right. Yeah. And you've got to get it from here to the bank one way or the other.
Yeah.
So there is a cost for that.
Yeah.
Great. How, in the short amount of time you've acquired 2 locations, you're totally brand new to the industry. What were let's say the top 2 or 3 things you looked for when you were like you mentioned earlier, when you look at these stores online, you'll see what the asking price is and what they say the gross revenue. You're like, and they list a few expenses and you're like 60% margin. How can that be? What are the things you're looking for when you analyze a store quickly to say, is it right for Star Laundromats?
Yeah, so the first thing is revenue. So I want to be looking for higher revenue. So anything that's and the reason is like I mentioned earlier, we're in this growth phase. So the connection between high revenue is it's probably got a large customer base. From a large customer base, you can continue to grow from there. So if the revenue is low, there's more effort in going and acquiring customers is my thinking. So start looking for high revenue. With high revenue typically comes higher expenses.
Yeah.
So that you just got to know that. And so the next thing the next thing I look at is the advertised net income. What there's a whole bunch of EBITDA. There's I never know the right accounting term, but the bit that you're left with at the end after you pay your expenses.
Jason, I went to school to study business and dropped out probably like second semester when I was like, this is not how it was at my dad's store.
Yeah, your profit, and then that's not even really the right term, but the bit that you're left with after you pay your expenses.
Right.
So that particularly in New York is, I have not seen a laundromat for sale yet where that has not been overinflated.
Never.
And so what's typically happening is they're underreporting on what the expenses are, and therefore the calculation between revenue and expenses leaves you with a profit that is higher than what it actually is. So a quick calculation that I like to do is okay, what's the payroll? So you ask the broker, what are the opening hours for the store? What's the payroll?
Right.
And so New York has $15 per hour, plus you've got some taxes. I kind of use $18 as my number. So you can just work out, okay, if it's open 24 hours a day, 365 a year, your total annual payroll should be somewhere around $135,000. Is that the number that they've got in the expense column, or is it something less than that? You usually see it's going to be something like 90K. So okay, you've got to add on another 45K which comes out of that profit that's advertised. And so you can kind of go through and do a quick filter, and then so I take my expenses for utilities from running this store and my other store for the time I have, and go, okay, well, they're kind of makes sense for the revenue.
It's on par with what you're seeing now. It's on
par, and so you can get to a point where you go, okay, this is worth looking into further, or it's just so far wrong that I'm just going to pass on it. And then the other one that comes after that is length of lease and age of machines.
Okay.
So because I'm in this growth phase, I'm trying to look at things that have got machines that are 5 to 10 years old, because I know I can come in and run it for a few years before I need to worry about a retool.
Yeah, because it's going to be a big expense on the retool.
Yeah.
And I totally went blank on that. You said a couple things that just got my wheel spinning on it. But when you look at the utilities you mentioned, you'll use the utilities from here in your prior store.
Yeah.
What about when you got here? You had no reference of utilities then.
Yeah, so I think we got pretty lucky here. So the previous owner, I'd consider him a friend now. He's
That's awesome.
He's we actually just texted the other day. He's looking to change his POS, so he's asking some questions.
So he still has other laundromats.
Yeah, he has a couple more. And
okay, that's awesome.
He had 6. He sold down to 2, and then he just told me the other day that he's getting itchy feet again. He's going to go and buy another one. So, and he has a bunch of supermarkets as well. So he's a pretty successful businessman.
That's awesome.
So here he ran.
Buy another one.
Yeah, I laughed when he told me. I said you should get this one. Like he lives like really close to this, and he's buying.
I know when I can sell you. That's close to where you live.
I know we're not selling, but he lives near here, but he's buying out in Long Island. I was like, man, you're crazy. But so he had some fairly detailed spreadsheets that he gave us as our starting point.
That's awesome.
And so we were able to take those spreadsheets and then do further due diligence on that. So I kind of had to go at like this analysis of like working out the number of machines and your water, and I kind of think I got that right as a starting point. But that combined with the fact that kind of everything else that he gave me checked out.
Right.
So we were able to, like, over a period of time, build confidence in terms of, okay, these numbers are actually correct, right. Give or take, like, and to be honest with you, after we closed, the trend continued as his numbers said. So the business was actually declining, which he knew and we spoke about openly. He, as I said, he had a bunch of other laundromats and other businesses. And he wasn't focused on trying to grow the business. It was serving his purpose at that time, and so we understood that. So we actually continued to decline for a little bit, which we expected. We bottomed out, and then we've grown, and we're up about 40% in this store since we bought it. So,
and I'm glad you brought that example up because it's a true testament to what you touched on earlier and some of the conversations that go on about passive. And in that case, the owner, good, bad, or indifferent, it's his focus was somewhere else. And then when we take our eye off the ball sometime, things get affected in different ways. And as you mentioned, you saw there was a decline in the revenue here, but then when you took over, you bottomed out at one point, and then it started to climb again. So we're, to keep it short, we'll test it to now there's someone focused on the business that's looking at it 110% to figure out what are all these little things that are going on that you can do to drive growth, whether it's getting the machines all in operation, keeping the store clean, adding additional revenue, opening the store 24 hours, all these different
answer the
things.
Phone and
we call them little things, but they're huge to the client. And I think we're reaching a point in our industry where we need to stop having a conversation like my store is clean and my store is bright, or those are like the baseline. Like that should be like, I hear that over and over in some places, and like I just sit there and I'm just like, we're celebrating that we have a clean store, we have a brightly lit store. That should be the constant, because, and I might be totally off on this, but I'm gonna ride this horse till it dies. What we're saying today is my store is clean, my store is bright. That will become the zombie mats of the future, because that will be the baseline, and somebody else will be doing something at a higher level and be like, yeah, so what, your store is clean and bright, but it's not X. And that will be the thing that gets judged against. Well, I guess we'll have to reach out to Brian Grell and figure out what's going to be the new zombie mat standard 10 years from now and get him on board. Yeah. So when you saw the business bottom going down, revenue is declining, we know our business is a constant game, I'm going to say, of cat and mouse. We have customers who come, and then we have these customers that leave, attrition. Whether it's they move, they have a bad experience, people pass away, etc. How do you look at attrition, and then what are you doing to combat it?
Yeah, so I kind of look at it the other way. So attrition is hard to measure because you kind of don't know that the customer's left until they never come back again, right? And we've actually seen customers that have come back, 8 months later.
Wow.
So why did they leave? I don't know. It's actually on my list of things to do. So we're trying to engage with our customers better than we do today. So I mentioned before, we started to answer the phone. I think that's like, that's your baseline. Everyone should answer their phone. That's a given. But what can you do above and beyond that? And so we're trying to put in automated processes where we can text and email our customers on a regular basis, so as we're top of their mind because the laundry pile's up and it's never anyone's like, great, I'm going to do the laundry today, right? It's always like, oh man, I got to do that thing again. And so if you're top of their mind when the pile's at its peak,
right,
and you're making it easy for them to get that laundry done, then I kind of think of it that way. So what am I trying to do to not attrit? So how can I make sure I continue to be top of mind for our customers? The people who move away or die or regrettably have a bad experience, even So that's probably a different category. If they have had a bad experience, I do think we can get them back. I was on the phone yesterday to a customer who had their first experience with us wasn't a great one. We spent 30 minutes on the phone, and she placed an order at the end of it, and we're going to hopefully have her as a lifelong customer.
Right.
But the attrition piece is hard to measure, right? So that's my point there is that you kind of don't know they've left until you kind of never know, because I always think that if they've been here at some point in time, there's a chance you can get them back. That's my thinking.
Right.
And so I'm focused on like, how do I get that customer back? And then the other part, the bit that I think you can measure is okay, well, how do we go and acquire new customers?
Okay.
So you're always going to have something, a percentage fall out the bottom. That I think is really hard to measure. How do you make sure that the stuff that's coming in the top is more than the bit that's falling out the bottom? And I think we are succeeding in that. So I mentioned to you before we started the interview that we had 25 new customers come into both the two stores over the weekend.
Right, and that was just on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
So that's massive, right? Saturday and Sunday are our biggest days, but we are seeing, I guess if you average it out, like historically we've seen an average of 3 new customers per day since we purchased, and that's sort of peaked and troughed based on some of the different things we've done to try and acquire those customers. But it was actually one of the goals that I had at the start, was to have 3 customers per day as our growth target, averaged out over a year, and we're give or take we're kind of there. So and there was some method to that relates to like revenue growth and financial targets that we had. So my thinking was that we're going to have some attrition. If we can acquire 3 new ones, that's going to be more than our attrition, and then that's going to link into some revenue and financial targets that we have. So the attrition piece I think it's really hard to measure, but it is. I do think you can reduce it by not having bad experiences is the one obvious one, but also people, they get busy and they make decisions based on the fact that I used to go to this laundromat and I changed for a reason that I don't know. But if you can reach out to them and say, hey, we're still here and haven't been here for a while, and how about we give you a promo code and you can come back and get a discount.
That's it.
It's much easier to have an existing customer come back. It's cheaper, that to have an existing customer come back and use a promo code than to go on. The cost of acquiring a new customer is much more than that.
Much higher.
Yeah.
What would you say that you're comfortable sharing, and tactics or strategy you're using here in Staten Island or in Brooklyn to acquire customers to keep the top of the funnel greater, as you mentioned, than what's going out the back door?
So I have no experience in this whatsoever. So I'm learning as we go. And so where we started our journey was, okay, we're going to do pay-per-click advertising. Google Ads was our focus.
Yeah. And
so we dumped a bunch of money into that. We're onto our 3rd pay-per-click marketing agency, I guess is what you'd say. And so we started with an agency to start with.
Okay.
And that was all we did. We said, like, here's some money, go and get us new customers. And like, to be fair to those guys, like, that's super naive. Like, we weren't doing our part in that part of that.
It's a two-way thing.
It's a two-way thing, right? So what did we learn as part of that, and what have we learnt to come through to where we are today? So our website at that point in time, it was pretty shitty. And so the ability for a customer to click on one of our ads, come to our website, understand what our experience was, and then get to a point where they either place an order online or try to call us or come to the store, that experience wasn't great. Like, where are they located? I couldn't find it on the website. The address wasn't obvious. There wasn't an easy way to call us from the website.
Right.
So we've put a lot of effort into making our website easy to use for the customer is one thing. So making sure that there's a button at the top of the page above the fold that they can click on for order now. They can see our pricing. They can get directions to each of our stores, and our phone numbers are prominent. So all of that is above the fold now on our website. And then on the back end of the website, we're doing a whole bunch of work around SEO, so both on-page SEO and off-page SEO. So anyone who doesn't know that, you can Google those terms. But so, on-page, we're trying to make sure that, all the meta tags and all of that stuff that I really don't know much about, but I know is important to making sure that our website ranks from a search engine perspective higher than our competitors. So that's the on-page side of it. And then the off-page side of it, you guys are going to help me out here when we do it, when you link to my website after this
in
interview.
the description.
Yeah, in the description. So the off-page stuff around building links between, more authoritative websites back to your website and vice versa. And then linking inside your website from one page to another also has some value there. So we've done a lot of work on that. Probably in the last 2 months is where we've really sort of started to, focus in on that. We've got a guy that we found on Upwork who's helping us with that, and
That's awesome.
we just got an open-ended contract, and we're slowly seeing our ranking come up. So I think we use Moz to go in and check our domain authority, and we started at 1, I think is the lowest score you can get. We're sitting at 5 2 months later. So
that's awesome.
Our near-term target is to get that to 15. So from what I understand, like a local service-based business, if they can be in the range of 10 to 15, they're sort of, that's like the first sort of, okay, if we get there, we're going okay.
Yeah, I forget what that map is called, when you can see it and then they have the number scores all around it.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then longer term, I want to get into the 60s, but I think it's going to take some time and some more work to get our domain authority up to there. So that's on the website side of it. And then we've obviously continued with the pay-per-click advertising. At the moment, we're focused on Google because there's search intent. I think, Facebook and social media, it's more of okay, I'm scrolling and I may or may not be interested in laundry when the ad comes up.
Right, like
whereas
Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah,
on Google,
they're
looking
for laundry. And so we're on to our third provider for that. We've just recently started with them just a few weeks ago. And so we had this is a bit of an odd situation, but we had a Google Ads account which was based in Australia.
Okay.
And so all of my ads were running in AUD, and so I was constantly having to work out what are these things costing me
did a conversion
based on the exchange rate. And so we started again with the new provider with the new ads account. So our account is going through the algorithm and learning, and so we're sort of we're not having amazing results yet, but we didn't really expect to given where we are with the significant
it's
change.
It's still early in it.
Yeah, so there's that side of it. And then the other part that we have, again, in the last probably 2 to 3 months, we've really started to focus on reaching out through email and SMS. So both stores had a few thousand customers on the existing point of sales.
Right.
So we're able to take those out of the old point of sales and bring them into ours. And so we have about 5,000 customers in our database of people who have been a customer of one store or the other at a point in time in the past. And so we're going through a process of trying to re-engage with, so the system allows me to see customers who've placed orders, and so we treat them differently. They're more around nurturing them to come back for their next order. But we have a few thousand customers who've never placed an order since I've owned either of the locations. So we're going through a process of reaching out to those customers on a regular basis, using an automated piece of software that helps us do that.
Yep.
And we're seeing people who on the 8th SMS have come into the store and placed an order with us.
They haven't made an order since you've taken over.
Yeah, but through this process of sending them, 8 SMSs that says, hey, come back and use this promo code.
Right.
We know you used to be a customer, but, we've just recently bought the store, come in and do your laundry. And so we're seeing, the 9th round of that went out today, but just last week the 8th SMS went out, and we had 3 customers come in the day that message went out and place,
So
a few
you're
$100
doing that once what's the frequency you do that?
I try and vary it. So the tool we use, it just has like a workflow sequence, and you can
just set each
8 days, 4 days. Right. I try to vary it up to make it so as it's not every 7 days.
Right. It seems somewhat more human than the system just doing it on a schedule.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's Wednesday at 4 o'clock again.
I knew it.
There's that laundromat SMS.
You know what? I need to do laundry today, but I'm gonna wait till Wednesday because they always send it, and then I'm gonna get $10 off.
Yeah. So we're offering some pretty big discounts there, and again, we're trying to, through this whole, interwoven with all of this is like, okay, what does it actually cost me to acquire a customer?
Right.
I think it's coming out at around $45 per customer we're acquiring at the moment. Wow. I don't know whether that's right or not. There's a bunch of different ways of little models that I've tried to develop.
And is that self-service
only,
or pick up and
just
delivery.
pick up and delivery and
Okay.
wash and fold
Okay.
and dry cleaning.
I can
and
see,
dry
yeah.
cleaning. There's a big market, I think, for laundromats and dry cleaning.
It's
That's probably our fastest growing segment.
we'll have to do it part 2 on that, because it's interesting, because I hear on the dry cleaner side that the business is dying because of COVID. Everybody worked at home, and these dry cleaners are closing. But my thought is, and I recently looked at a report, and forgive me, I forget the financial institutions use this software to run reports on different industries to consider, like when they're making loans and they want to understand what the business is doing. And I looked at one, and it was just on dry cleaning industry. It says laundry dry cleaning, but it's primarily looking at dry cleaning. And they're looking at projected growth for it. Even though everyone's like COVID took away, people were at home, these dry cleaners are closing. But that business that they had, even if that business went down, let's say their business dropped 40%, they still got 60% of business there. And if that store closes, where does that 60% of business go? I still believe it's tremendous opportunity. And you touched on it just now, saying you see it growing.
Yeah, so the way I think about it is like every closet in this country and in Australia, can't talk about the rest of the world, but every closet in those 2 countries, there's something in there that needs to be dry cleaned.
Right.
Whereas I don't think every single household is going to use wash and fold or pick up and delivery. Mm-hmm. And so I think the opportunity is actually every house for dry cleaning. So everyone has, the suit that they wear to the uncle's wedding, or, something that has to be dry cleaned. Whereas not everyone is going to use, laundry services at a point in time. And so I think what we see is, now that we're starting to get the data that Sense is allowing us to capture, so self-serve customers, we're sort of starting to be able to track some of that. And then what we can see is okay, well, some of those self-serve customers have come and placed dry cleaning orders. Wow, exactly. That's interesting. And so like our the ability of like, okay, how do I think about, so prior to that, I used to think about them as being like 2 separate audiences, whereas I think there's actually more crossover than we probably realise, particularly in the dry cleaning segment. And so I think it's still working through the numbers, but I actually think it's our fastest growing segment is the dry cleaning. Yeah, and the other part is like, sure, more people working from home, and so you're probably doing less suits and shirts. But the thing we're starting to see come through is like the $400 tracksuit that is made by Gucci, or
I remember we were talking about it. It's like, where are these things going to go?
Yeah, like there's some really high-end clothing that people wear mainly on the weekends.
Right.
That is not
not
made
to.
They're not going to put it in the washer and dryer.
They're not.
You pay $400 or $500 for a tracksuit. You're not going to jumpsuit. You're definitely going to take the risk to put that in a dryer. So to get a dry clean for $15 it's a no-brainer.
They'll be like, no problem.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And looking at it, you touch on a good point where, and I'm saying as an industry, not every operator, not every owner, we tend to look at self-service separate from pickup and delivery or drop-off. There's a lot of crossover between the services we can offer them. And when we started doing dry cleaning, I noticed some of the things that you mentioned, but where it really hit home for me is when we started doing sneaker cleaning. Yeah. And I would see people like bring laundry, dry cleaning, and then people would we have some clients who bring all 3 to us, and I sit there and I'm just like blown away by it. Yeah. But someone dropped off their laundry and they were like, wait a minute, you guys clean sneakers? And we were like, yeah. And they ran out to the car and pulled like 3 pair of sneakers out the trunk and just dropped them. It was like, how much to do these? And we were just like,
so that's the other part in that. So what you're talking about there is just like ease for the customer. So I just look at dry cleaning as, okay, the customer just has one stop to make now. They drop off their laundry. Yep. While you're here, they give you a bag of dry cleaning. In your case, they give you a couple of pairs of sneakers. They don't have to make 3 stops. They just come in one location. That's it. You're taking away all their problems. And I think for that customer, they're less sensitive to price. It's more about convenience.
One stop.
And it's one stop for them. It's one place to come back to get everything. And we have a system which, you're on the same system. They get an SMS when their order's ready, and they know that, they're not wasting a trip to come back. It's not ready.
Is it ready? And, I dropped some stuff off at another dry cleaner. Don't tell Soapbox that. And I was rushing yesterday, and it's one couple blocks from my house. And I was like, I don't feel like driving all the way over to the store. So I dropped it there, and it's like,
is it back? Is it not? Like, you're trying to call, they don't answer.
I went there. I was like, can I get it tomorrow? And he's like, yeah. And he said, I can't remember what system he has, but I'm looking at it. I'm looking at his receipt, and I was like, I think I know what he has. He prints out the receipt. He gives it to me. No text, no email, nothing. And then I was like, can I get it tomorrow? He's like, yeah, no problem. And I dropped it off 7 a.m. yesterday. So this morning, I'm like, yeah, I got to go on a trip. I was like, let me go get the dry cleaning today so I don't have to rush home tonight to get it. I run in this store at 7:30 this morning, and I'm like, I could see in his face when he was walking towards me. I know that face.
It's not ready.
I've had that face before, and I hold the ticket up. I was like, is it ready? He's like, oh, not yet. And I was like, what time you close? He's like 7. In my head, I'm like, damn, I wish like I got a text or something from him. So those little things add. And
not only that, like I think like your ability to like turn over revenue in your store. So nothing worse than having stuff that you've processed or had dry clean and it sits on the shelf and you can't get paid for it.
And the guy's cash only too.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I went to pull my car one day and he's like, cash only. I was like, damn.
But I think those, you know, I walk into those stores all the time and they've just got like,
it's a ton of stuff.
A mountain of stuff that's on their shelf there that they haven't been able to get paid for is my assumption. But yeah, we're able to, through our system, we're able to like send out messages to say, hey, come and get it, come and get it.
People forget.
And we have people forget, right? And we have very little stuff sits on our shelf. I mean, you go back there now, there's a bunch of stuff on our shelf, but very few bags are you know, older than, you know, a month or 6 weeks. So, which still shocks me that it sits here for that long. But yeah, when I bought both locations, there was stuff that was 2 and 3 years old that is still in the store.
Still in the store.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned you have a system that sets it up and it's set up in a sequence, which is great. When you send out emails, is it something you set up like a newsletter that you some kind of standard email that you send out every week, or is that in that sequence also?
So we're blogging on our website, and that mainly is for SEO.
Got it.
On the email side of it, at the moment we're mainly sending out. We call it we've got a welcome and sign up no offer sequence. So if they come in as a customer and they place an order, they're getting a welcome to us. Welcome to Star Laundromats email.
Right.
Here's a bit more information about our business. If you ever need any help, here's our phone numbers, or here's how you can contact us. And if they don't place an order, it goes to the other branch where signed up but no offer. No order. They can come to our website, they can enter in their details, and we get their email, their phone number. Then they'll go into the sequence to say, okay, you didn't place an order. You know, maybe the kid came into the room or the dog crapped on the, you know, on the carpet, and in that moment they had to go and do something else.
That's right.
So if we've captured their details, we'll send them an automated reminder to say, hey, you came and took a look around, but you didn't place an order. You know, can you help me? I have my own number on that one. Right. If you want to reach out, here's my personal cell. Here's a little.
That's pretty gutsy.
Hey, I got a. You know, I don't sound like the normal person. You know, if I can get someone on the phone, there's usually a bit of a story, and you know, I can use it hopefully a little bit of charm to.
That Staten Island accent draws.
Yeah, that's right. So, look, you know, I made a decision probably about 4 months ago. I originally didn't have my phone number available to anyone to. Right. But hey, it's my business. You know, I've moved across from the other side of the world to come and do this thing, and people want to call me, I'm happy to talk, and and it kind of goes both ways. One, it's like, okay, if I can get on the phone to a customer who's not sure, I can help them through the process, and we can get another order, and then hopefully a lifelong customer. But the other side of it is okay, if they've got something they're not happy about, who's the best person for them to talk to? It's me. It's no one else, right? Buck stops with me. This is my business. I'm responsible for everything that occurs here. Sure, they might have had a problem with a particular attendant, but that problem ultimately comes back to me to solve. You know, if they've had a problem with an attendant and there's an issue there, then it's not, we can talk the details with the attendant, but whatever led up to that, it's a problem that I need to solve. And this comes back to that systems and processes piece. Okay, so what broke down at a point in time where the customer had a bad experience? We can fix that, right? And so the one I spoke about yesterday, I was on the phone for about 30 minutes with the customer. With their first order with us, they had a bag of clothing that they told us that they wanted dried for 10 minutes only. And I was like, 10 minutes? Like, it's still wet, right? And so I spoke to the attendant, the driver who picked up the order. She said, no, I asked. And they said 10 minutes. And I said, are you sure? And they said, yes, I'm sure. I said, okay, well, that's super weird. And I said, and how do they want it back? And she said, she told us just to put it back in the bag. And so at that point in time, I was like, I need to call this customer. Right. And then it was the equivalent of the dog shitting on the carpet. It's like something else happened in the business, and I never made the call. the process ran. We delivered the items back as the customer had asked, and I knew, that at that time that there's something was off.
Right.
And so later that day, the next day, she calls up and she wasn't happy. And
I got wet clothes back.
And she got wet clothes back.
Right.
And I said, well, look, we checked with you and you asked us to dry it for 10 minutes. She said, well, that's what the other laundromat does. I'm like, bingo. Okay, so the other laundromat wasn't drying them for 10 minutes, obviously, but that's probably what they were telling her.
Right.
And so she equated that to something. That's how it's done.
Right.
So at that point in time, she wanted her money back, and so we gave her a full refund. I drove to her house, and I gave her the money in cash. She wasn't home, and so
you had to go back again.
No. So I gave it to a neighbour. Whole long story, but that was like a couple of weeks ago, and she called back yesterday, and she said, look. She goes, first of all, she said, I was super shocked that you kept your word. You said you'd give your money back, and then you went out of your way to come and give it to me.
Right.
She said that doesn't happen very often. So I was impressed with that. And she said everything else in the order other than the bag was perfect. It was exactly how I wanted it. She said, look, can we talk through, what happened with the thing in the bag? And so obviously there was a misunderstanding of what it was that she wanted. And so we've now gone and updated her profile to say this particular bag that she's going to send in regularly is going to be treated in the way that she wants it done.
Exactly.
And, she's got a pickup schedule for next week, and then, hopefully we keep that customer for life. But, my point there was if anyone else took that order other than me, you run the risk of it. Anyone else took that call than me of the disgruntled customer, you run the risk of it not having the outcome you want.
Right.
And so at the point we're at now, we're only at 2 stores. I can still take all of those calls, and it's not a
high volume.
It's not a high burden for me, but I look at it as the ability to go and actually keep that customer and have them turn a bad experience into a good one. And if I can continue to do that, that customer says, well, I tried this place and you're not going to believe it. We had a bad outcome initially, but the guy drove to my house and he gave me the money, and then he called me, and and so I think people aren't used to that, and so you turn this bad into a positive, and
it's a huge
and then they tell their friends, and she actually came to us from a referral, so one of her friends had referred it.
Wow.
And so that's why she first tried us, and then she had this bad outcome. And
she goes to a friend and you told me this crappy place. Look at this.
Yeah, but I think
you won her over.
Yeah, we'll win her over, and
that's awesome. So I'm sitting here. I'm glancing at your shirt, Star Laundromats.
Should get it in the.
We'll make sure we highlight it on the thumbnail. And here's Staten Island. We pulled up Star Laundromats. Beautiful sign. I remember when you posted online when you're installing a new sign.
Yeah.
What's the name of the laundromat the laundromat in Brooklyn?
Yeah, so we acquired it. It was Premier Laundry Services.
Okay.
And we've got some mock-ups done at the moment to change the sign over. So I mentioned before we started that we've done a bunch of work in the last 6 months around getting our brand right. So you go to a website, you'll see there's a common colour. It's the orange in our logo, and so the colour and the branding. Again, I don't have a lot of experience in that, but understand that it's super important. And so we actually got a plan to change the storefronts for both locations to be more aligned to our brand, as well as in-store signage and things like that. So we did some real basic stuff here when we first bought it, and you'll see the signs are actually like a light blue or a greeny sort of colour. That was what our thinking was at the time. We've now sort of nailed down what we think our brand looks like, and we've got a plan in both locations. We've got some mock-ups done of what the 2 storefronts will look like.
Right.
And our plan, when we eventually get to the scale we want to get to, is that they'll all be the same brand. We'll have a strong online presence, and I think about our online presence as like another asset that has value. And
100%.
And if we get to a point in time down the track where we want to sell, I think that online piece and our customer list and the processes that we spoke about, and our the automation for email and things like that. I think if you understand actually what that is, it actually has a lot of value.
Yeah. And
I'm putting a lot of effort into making sure that we grow that part as well as the physical locations, because I think if you do get to a point where you want to sell, I think if you can get that piece right, it's like an extra multiple, or it's another asset that you can value in a sale process. So
the value for the laundry business And I say laundry business, not just laundromat, because you're doing a combination dry cleaning, pickup and delivery, as well as self-service. It's not just in the physical location anymore. It's not just how much revenue is coming in. And you touched on two important pieces that get overlooked a lot. And I hope they continue to get overlooked when we're buying.
Me too. I know what you're going to say.
Not when we're selling. But it's the client list as well as the brand itself, like that presence, what value.
And like the frequency. So like one of the other things that we're starting to measure is, okay, we're acquiring customers. We spoke at length about that, but how we go and acquire that customer, how often are they coming back?
Right.
I think that's another piece that the industry doesn't really sort of ever look at in terms of, okay, I've got this amount of revenue. How much of it is coming from a reoccurring customer?
That's it.
And that, particularly if you're talking about like the self-serve part today, the tools don't really allow you to measure that. I think I reckon in the next 12 months with the Sense Connect, where Sense Connect is going, I'm going to be able to measure that. And so I think then across, the whole business, you'll be able to say, okay, we acquired these customers over this period of time. And of the total we acquired, this percentage have come back regularly.
Right.
And that's actually that has a lot. Like when you talk about multiples, if you can put all that out to someone who wants to acquire, a small chain of laundromats, if you can paint a picture around that, wow, your multiple just went up in my opinion.
Oh yeah, your multiple's going to be much higher than someone just looking at what's your gross and what's your expenses and what's left over.
Yeah.
Right. So you talk about the brand, you talk about multiple locations. What's your goal with laundry?
Yeah, so when I came here, the plan at that point in time was to get to 10 locations. And it actually still is the plan. Okay. And so the 10, your next question is why 10? I imagine is probably the next question.
Read in my mind.
Yeah, so 10, if you extrapolate that out to, 10 locations that have an average of this revenue and this profit would equate to an amount that comes into my pocket at some point in time of X, and so that's like the longer term piece. Where I want to get to in the near term is I think if I can get to 4 locations, we can start to put in a layer of management that we can then start to train with the view that we get to the 10 stores down the track, because 10 stores I won't be able to run on my own, and I don't want to. And I want to have a team that so I do my best work with the team. I spoke before about I had 400 people work for me. I had obviously like a whole bunch of departments that all had their leaders. That's those sorts of organisations are where I do my best work. It's not fixing a washer. I mean, I can do that, but and at this point in time I need to do that. But if we can get to 10, it allows me to have a layer of management in. And segment our business into ways that today I've got a bit of a view of what I think it will look like, but if we get to 10, we'll have enough scale that allows us to.
You can have multiple layers of management.
Yeah, whether or not it's multiple or one, but it'll allow us to put in place management to then go and take the processes and systems that we're building today, and then run the business how I want to run it, and then my goal at that point in time will be to either continue to grow the business by acquiring more locations, or maybe we go and look at an exit strategy of 10 locations that are all operating under one system, that have a common brand, that have this strong online presence.
Right. And I was gonna ask you that, like, how important is the brand to you? But as you explain the roadmap with 10 growing 2 stores to go to 10 stores, and they're all under the same brand, it carries a certain level of cachet, but value also that is viewed in other businesses, in other industries, but not in ours.
Yeah, it's really interesting that I guess the industry, for reasons that I don't fully understand coming from Australia, it's just like super fragmented. There's very few sort of dominant players.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive opportunity, right? And it's actually one of the things that I looked at.
Right.
You asked the questions like, why laundry and why'd you come here and look at that? And I looked at this industry like, wow, that is like really strange, like a massive industry that has no like real dominant players. And so I look at things like I try and look at other industries and say, okay, what can I learn from the dominant players in those other industries. And one I've just sort of been looking at recently is pizza and Domino's. And so Domino's has been able to, over the last, I guess, probably 2 decades, go from like a fairly small business to like a behemoth. Huge. It's a market leader. It's really tech forward. You know, and that industry, pizzas, I imagine, I don't know, but I assume it's fairly modest margins. And they've got this business that has multiple layers of management. They've got a dominant brand. They're really tech focused. I believe they have this like 1845 that they talk about internally, where the pizza's delivered in 18 minutes and they have to have a 4.5 stars or higher rating as a measure of how they sort of. So they're like, there's a bunch of stuff that you can look outside of the laundry industry at other places and go, okay, well, like, how do I take some of the things that they've done over here and then bring it into my business? And and I think, you know, that's just one example. Like, there's numerous out there, and I think our industry is, like, what I see is that there's a whole bunch of people coming in that haven't been lifelong laundromat owners, and some of the things that I think are starting to be discussed, and you see in communities and forums online that, you know, there's a new way of thinking about, okay, how do I bring a bit of tech, or what are some of the shortcuts that I can use to, you know, accelerate my business? And it's really exciting. You know, it's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
It's like we're in the early days of the Wild West.
Yeah,
like,
it feels like it's the start of the gold rush.
Things are being developed. It's like the gold rush. That's a great example. The question is, are we going to be digging for gold, or are we going to be selling picks and shovels? You know, it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, you know, Jason, I greatly appreciate you allowing us to be here today in your store to experience it and share your insights with the viewers and the listeners, and just being so accommodating. And to close out, if I wrote you a check for $500,000 right now, how would you apply it to the business?
So there's probably 2 things I'd do with it.
Okay.
I'd take part of it and I'd use it as a deposit for another location.
Okay.
And then the other part of it, I'd continue with this growth piece. So I think we're almost at the point where I'm starting to see that we've got a system around our customer acquisition. I think we're there yet, and I know you and I have spoken about this, you know, many times in the past. But I'd reserve some of that. I'd continue the testing we're doing at the moment with customer acquisition, and I think I'm super excited that we're pretty close to, okay, I understand now how we're acquiring a customer online. And if I can get that right, what I'd probably do is you know, dump a bunch of money into customer acquisition. So this store here, you know, we've got 1 attendant per shift. We're open 24 hours. We're 4,500 square feet. We've got about 1,500 square feet next door that we really don't use for much other than some storage area.
It's a lot of space. What
I'd like to be able to do is you know, have multiple attendants working at any one time, go through into that area that we don't really use, have a dedicated attendant area, maybe bring in some folding machines. If we can get the customer acquisition piece right, then I can get more volume into the store, and I can really maximise the capital that I've spent on this location, and you know, and then see where it takes me, because I'm super excited as the volume grows. You run into different problems, you have different challenges, you need different people in your team. There's different problems to solve, and you know what I guess you would ask me, like, what do I really like doing? It's like solving problems. You know, that's my whole life. It's been about, okay, how do I solve this next problem? And I guess, you know, probably part of the reason why I came to this country to start in an industry I had no idea about is that there's going to be heaps of problems to solve.
It's a big problem.
So yeah, I'd probably do those 2 things: go and acquire a 3rd location,
right,
and then tip a bunch of money into customer acquisition. Growth. Yeah,
awesome. Long as you don't say you was going to put it in your pocket, that's when I was going to get a little concerned.
I never even thought about that.
That's awesome. Jason, listen, again, thank you so much for having us. I appreciate you letting the team and I come hang out with you. Yeah. And you know, enjoy time here in Staten Island hanging out with you. I appreciate it, my man.
Thanks, man.
I look forward to more conversations.
Talk again soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.